Sexual temptation.
Oh. Woo! It's up!
Turks, Cenk Uygur, and Chris Barron with you guys. We have super substantive stories about train derailments and how the government's screwing you and corporations are screwing you. So, i.e., welcome to the Young Turks. But we also have a little bit of fun where Kayleigh McEnany versus Donald Trump. Oh my God, what is happening? Oh God, it's still my beating heart. All right, we'll do that later in the program. Casper.
Honestly, we begin today with one banger after another from The Lever. Okay, if you can support the work they're doing, please do so, because The Lever is probably the only publication that I've witnessed cover the train derailment story exactly how it should be covered, with a focus on the lack of regulations, the various players behind it. So let's get started. Let's begin with liar Buttigieg. In response to growing pressure from members of his own party, following a spate of train derailments, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg has been pretending as if he has really no power to regulate the rail industry and prevent some of the terrible derailments that have occurred recently, including the one in East Palestine, Ohio, which of course led to toxic chemicals being released into the environment there. We're seeing endless photos, videos, all sorts of imagery of dead fish, people living in the area with rashes. Well, is that the truth? Is it true that the head of the transportation department doesn't have the ability to unilaterally regulate the rail industry? Let's give you the details. In a Twitter thread posted more than a week after Norfolk Southern's fiery train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, Buttigieg indicated that he cannot reinstate an Obama-enacted, Trump-repealed law requiring some trains carrying hazardous materials to replace their Civil War-era braking systems with new electronically controlled pneumatic brake technology. Now, this is something that David Sirota, who founded the lever, came on the show to talk to us about in great detail. Make sure you check out that interview just to get filled in on that context. Now, here is the tweet in question. This is what Pete Buttigieg had tweeted. We're constrained by laws on some areas of rail regulation, like the braking rule withdrawn by the Trump administration in 2018 because of a law passed by Congress in 2015, but we are using the powers we do have to keep people safe. But before you jump in, Cenk, real important, Pete Buttigieg was actually debunked by the Twitter account belonging to the Transportation Department. This is flat out false, and this is a response to David Sirota's tweet about it. There are constraints, but as the Department of Transportation has made clear, we will look to the NTSB investigation to take action necessary to ensure accountability and improved safety. I've got a lot more of that from where it came from. But before we get to it, Cenk, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, his own department debunking him was awesome. Now, I'm sure that if you ask them, they would say, no, we're debunking David Sirota. There's a lot we can do. Well, then why did the transportation secretary say there was nothing you could do? Sirota didn't make him tweet that, and Sirota didn't make him do all these things. By the way, this is why David Sirota drives the rest of the reporters in Washington crazy, and the politicians, it's the Democratic politicians crazy. So, I mean, just flat out busted. Rest of the reporters up and at him. There's a lot of things that Buttigieg can do. And the reason I jumped in is because this is the #1 talking point of all Democrats on everything.
Yes.
There was nothing we could do.
Yes, exactly.
There was nothing we could do. And then his own department goes, oh, well, there's a lot we could do, sorry. All right.
100%. Now, remember, Buttigieg referenced some 2015 law. What was he talking about? So apparently he was referencing a law passed by Congress in 2015 at the urging, by the way, of the railroad industry. Railroad industry does their lobbying, they buy off the politicians, and the politicians, of course, pass legislation that tends to be friendly of industry. But it required the executive branch to conduct cost-benefit analysis of the brake rule before enacting it, okay? But here's the thing. Trump used that law to kill the braking rule, but the cost-benefit analysis his administration used to do so was subsequently discredited. It was discredited. So the Transportation Department under Pete Buttigieg could just do the cost-benefit analysis immediately. I mean, that's the first thing I would do, right? If I had that kind of power, and I would immediately implement the new braking system regulation to ensure that, should something go awry, the trains can brake much faster. It would mitigate so many disastrous situations, right? But of course, the rail industry doesn't want to have to pay the extra costs associated with implementing those newer brakes.
Yeah, so look, if you're gonna be really generous to Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, the corporate Democrat wing of the party, you would say, well, it's not a conscious decision. He's not saying, hey, I want to protect the railroad companies from getting regulated and so that they could have more accidents, right? Well, okay, then it's instinctual, right? He's been in office for over 2 years now. He never thought, hey, and by the way, as Anna's I think gonna show you, a lot of groups asked him, states asked him, please regulate on this. And his instinct was, no, maybe I'll get to it in the second term at the end or something, but I'm not gonna regulate the trains at all, pretty much at all. By the way, the giant plane delays, etc. What did he choose? His instinct is always to choose supporting corporations and not regulating them and not enforcing safety standards and other things to protect consumers.
That's exactly right. Now, asked about the breaking rule, a spokesperson said that it would be difficult to reinstate the rule in its previous configuration, given previous legal challenges. The spokesperson said proposing a new rule would require performing a new cost-benefit analysis, which you guys should do. Though they acknowledge that the department has the ability to prepare the analysis. So why don't they do it?
Yeah, I'm gonna look. When you step in, if it was you guys that is the head of the transportation department, anybody, right? And what would be your first instinct? Trump deregulated all of these different industries, no matter which department you're in. Actually, the first thing I would ask is, what did he deregulate in our industry? Our job is to regulate them, so I need to know so we can keep people safe, because he took a lot of risks to help his corporate buddies, right? Apparently, Buttigieg didn't ask that at all of any part of the transportation industry, which is at a bare minimum deep incompetence.
Another just point I want to bring up that really reveals the incompetence of Pete Buttigieg and how he was not qualified for the position that he was tapped for and is now serving in. He's doing a little bit of damage control. So he goes on Yahoo News and he's asked about the disaster in East Palestine, Ohio. And his response is that the Ohio train disaster was one of thousands of cases a year, or one of 1,000 cases a year.
Oh, how does that make it better?
How does that make it better?
Worse.
You know, you're the head of the transportation department. You see that there are 1,000 train derailments. It's a big problem, no? And you have the power to do something about it, but he's decided not to. How long has the Biden administration been in power?
Well over 2 years now.
Wow, seems like there was quite a bit of time for him to take some action.
So as the Lever has reported over and over again, different groups in different industries have asked the Biden administration, please, we're drawing your attention to this. So for example, in this case, the brakes, some of the brakes are from technology from the Civil War. But we have new brakes, they work much better. They'll save a lot of, first of all, money, let alone lives, from these giant train derailments. And by the way, they don't save the train companies money. The railroads think installing them costs too much. They'd just rather pay the whatever it costs them for the accidents, right? But it costs East Palestine, Ohio, it costs all the different towns that they have the accidents, tremendous amount of money. But because we have no one protecting us in our government, it's not like Buttigieg and Biden are gonna make them pay the cost to the local communities. There's no way. In fact, the next story in the show is how Biden's team is joining the railroad companies in trying to screw over their customers and their employees.
There are a few things I also want to mention when it comes to the toxic chemicals, right? Because what made the derailment in Ohio so disastrous were the toxic chemicals that the train was carrying and how that was all released into the environment with the controlled burn. Now, as the Lever reports, more can also be done in regard to trains carrying hazardous or toxic materials. Let's go to graphic 6 here. Nothing prevents Buttigieg from using his existing rulemaking authority to expand the definition of a high hazard flammable train to cover trains like the one in Ohio. Under the existing limited definition, the Ohio train, which was carrying 5 tanker cars of vinyl chloride, a class 2 flammable gas and known carcinogen, was exempted from the classification's more stringent safety regulations.
So what would I do? So would I just go, okay, I already know what the highly dangerous chemicals are, here I'm regulating them? No, I would ask the specialists and I would ask the experts. And they would say, oh, this one you know is not that bad, you don't have to take extra precautions, the cost is not worth it. These, on the other hand, are highly flammable. By the way, as we saw in Ohio, they're highly flammable, right? And so then I would say, okay, then he has full power immediately, that's it. we're doing safety precautions, especially because they're jamming tons of cars onto these trains, making the trains much larger, much more dangerous, and they have less staff. You know how many staff were on this train? 2 and a trainee. For 150 cars, which is extraordinary.
And
right?
the rail lobby is lobbying hard to minimize that from 2 people to 1 person.
Okay, so that's when the government's supposed to protect its citizens. You're not supposed to serve the corporations. Corporations have plenty of firepower to serve themselves. So why does Buttigieg do it? If you're new to American politics, you might not know this, or if you're a Washington reporter. Okay, so number one, if you're in charge of the transportation industry as a regulator, when you go to run for president, which Buttigieg definitely will do at some point, if it's not 24, it's certainly 28, who's he gonna go to for fundraising? The industry he was regulating. And he's gonna cash tons and tons of campaign contributions. If you don't understand that, you just don't understand politics, please move on with your life and do something useful in this world. And he's correctly deduced that serving corporations rather than voters is how you get ahead in DC. That's why he has nonstop positive coverage. I mean, right now, look at this. This is a case study in American media. So mainstream media assiduously avoiding Buttigieg, giving him any blame. We don't know who is in charge of the Department of Transportation. Golly gee, could they regulate? We never know. Buttigieg must be protected at all costs. Good corporate robot that he is. Right-wing media is like, it's because he hates white people. Okay, it's like a flare they set off to distract you. The only people covering it accurately is progressive media saying, yes, he's a Democrat, but of course he's supposed to regulate, so we have safety precautions so people don't get hurt in places like Ohio.
Yeah, listen, corporate Democrat, corporate Republican, tomato, tomato, when it comes to policies that impact your day on a regular basis, okay? When it comes to industry, when it comes to regulating corporations, corporate Democrats, corporate Republicans, potato, potato, I'm serious. And I think that you see that here. And that's the difference between what you see in left-wing media versus right-wing media. No, you need to be fair and honest, okay? Don't be a tool for either party. Be honest with your audience about what's really going on and the type of corporate takeover that has occurred with Congress and with the executive branch in this particular case. Now, I want to reset for another part of this story because I think it's important to understand what transpired with that train prior to the derailment. New reports now indicate that the train that was derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, had broken down prior to the derailment. And even though employees for Norfolk Southern made it clear that they were concerned about that, seems like executives ignored it. Here's a video explaining more.
Employees working on the train were concerned about what they say was excessive weight and length in the days before it derailed and burst into flames.
Fire department reports to the station for a mutual aid fire with East Palestine.
According to employees familiar with the matter, the train broke down at least once before derailing on February 3rd. In a statement, Norfolk Southern said the weight was uniform throughout, with features to help reduce mechanical issues, and that a longer and heavier train used to run.
So of course, the company is trying to cover their tracks, no pun intended. But the train, which originated from Madison, Illinois on the evening of February 1st, broke down at least once before derailing in East Palestine, Ohio on February 3rd. And that's according to an employee who spoke to CBS News on the condition of anonymity. They don't want to be retaliated against. Now, the employees say there were concerns among those workers on the train over what they believed was the train's excessive length and weight. 151 cars, 9,300 feet long, 18,000 tons before it reached East Palestine, which contributed to both the initial breakdown and also the derailment. And one Norfolk Southern employee who spoke to CBS News said, quote, "We shouldn't be running trains that are 150 car lengths long. There should be some limitations to the weight and the length of the trains. In this case, had the train not been 18,000 tons, it's very likely the effects of the derailment would have been mitigated." We have more comments from other employees, but Jen, curious what you think.
I think the context is important, so I'm gonna read the next graphic. The train derailed is considered to be very long, according to Sarah Feinberg, who served as an administrator for the Federal Railroad Administration from 2015 to 2017. Quote, when I was a FRA administrator, I was not happy with the lengths of the trains, and they were 80 or 90 cars long, Feinberg said. This train was 50% longer. So as we've been covering this story, earlier we told you that the trains have been adding more and more cars to one ride, right? And so the reason they're doing that is obvious. If you have two different trains going, you need two different staff. And there's other factors involved, but they all relate to cost. So what they want to do is longer trains, less staff to save costs. Now, do they know that that will leave less time for inspections, less people to inspect, less safety, right? Yeah, they know all that. And I would be surprised if in their internal spreadsheets, they had not already accounted for a number of accidents that would result because they are not taking those safety precautions.
Exactly.
And then they put that into their budget and go, okay, we're gonna pay this amount for the accidents, but this is how much we would pay for the extra staff. Oh, the extra staff costs more. The shorter trains cost more. So who cares? We're gonna make more money this way. Add more trains, so we can keep on going with the gravy train. By the way, again, pun not intended, but the government lets them do it. That's why they do it. Otherwise, they'd be afraid that there would be a regulator that would say this is outrageous and have massive fines that would make it not worth it. But we know with corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans, they're gonna let them get away with everything.
In fact, just yesterday I shared with you guys that Norfolk Southern had announced a $10 billion stock buyback program just last year. So if you're wondering, well, what do they do with all those profits? All they care about is maximizing profits, right? Well, they have a generous dividend program for their shareholders. I talked about that as well. And $10 billion that they could have invested into a better braking system, better safety protocols, the things that would prevent these derailments from happening or mitigate the impact these derailments would have. They don't want to invest in that. That's not going to increase return on investment for their shareholders. So instead, they artificially bolster their stocks with corporate stock buybacks. $10 billion just last year.
Yeah, there's no question. And so why does Buttigieg let him get away with it? If you're, again, new to American politics, it's because he thinks serving corporate donors is the right strategy. And all of these are giant corporations. And so Buttigieg has sent out less to protect us, but more to do marketing on behalf of whichever corporation he's supposed to be regulating. So when there was those giant delays with Southwest, he did not come out and say, I'm fining Southwest for these delays and I'm gonna make sure that anybody who was affected gets their money back and then some, etc. No, he came out and said, no, we don't need to do anything. Don't worry, it's all under control. Everything is great. Southwest is amazing. We don't have to regulate them. Now he's coming out, didn't come out for 10 straight days. Now he's saying, there's nothing we could do, which is a total and utter lie that his own transportation department debunked. So his job is not to protect you, it's to protect corporations. And why? Because that's where all the money comes from for their campaigns. So I'm gonna read something from one of our members, really brilliant point. Mickey C, the Silver-Haired Dragon, wrote in. I said this during Nina's show, that's On Boss with Nina Turner on our network, check that out. But I have to say it again, Pete's only qualification for this position was dropping out of the primaries and backing Biden against Bernie.
Yep.
This position was his reward for that.
That's right.
Now that's actually indisputable. Like even if you ask the mainstream media reporter, they'd say, well, yeah, that's true, right? So he has no experience in transportation.
He was the mayor of a small town.
And a very bad one, by the way.
Yeah.
Like there's been a ton of marketing and propaganda for Pete Buttigieg because he uses SAT words and loves corporations. That's exactly what the elite love, right? But our own Jonathan Larson did devastating stories about his administration in South Bend. African Americans are livid with him. And it was both incompetence and a lot of racial issues in South Bend. You should read those stories. But by the way, when Sirota at the Lever or Larson at TYT or anybody else does real honest reporting about Buttigieg, we've literally had mainstream media reporters go, oh yeah, you guys don't like him, right? You're biased.
I would love to like him, right?
Yeah, why wouldn't I want?
Do the right thing and regulate these companies so they don't get away with what they've been getting away with, then I wouldn't be reporting these stories.
It's like saying,
I'd be giving him kudos.
Of course, why wouldn't we give him kudos if he did the right thing? Could you imagine he regulates them and prevents the accident, and we come out and we're like, oh yeah, we don't like people being protected. Well, on what planet? It's like we tell them 2 + 2 = 4 and they're like, oh, so you're biased against 5. No, you're weirdly biased in protecting him.
Yep.
And by the way, guys, it's good cop, bad cop. Right-wing media is attacking Buttigieg, but on his husband, on he likes diversity, and the railroad comes there. Like Joe Rogan today almost made it sound like black workers did the accident. What? It had nothing to do with any of that.
Listen, I don't know what Rogan said. I haven't heard it or read about it. But what I will say is, what Buttigieg did was he ignored what happened in Ohio for 10 days straight, spoke at an event. And what he didn't mention what happened with the derailment. All he talked about, he made a comment about how, oh, we need more diversity with construction workers. People who see infrastructure projects happening in their towns, they want to make sure that the construction workers working on those projects look like or are representative of people in the community. And look, guys, I know that for a lot of people, that's not an objectionable thing to say, and I agree, right? But at the same time, understand what, quite honestly, corporate Democrats tend to do. They have their own version of culture war distractions, right? They'll deflect from real issues, including issues where corporations are screwing us, corporations are making us sick, and they'll distract us with other culture war narratives that, in this case, it didn't work, right?
No, in a lot of ways it did work. I mean, the Lever's done an amazing reporting here, and now some of the other outlets, Associated Press, Reuters, are starting to come in. But guys, that's exactly what I was saying. It's good cop, bad cop, right? So Buttigieg, in order to distract you from the actual safety problems and the money that the corporations would have to spend, goes, oh, it should be diversity in the workers. And then Rogan and Fox News go, oh, perfect culture war issue.
Yep.
Oh, it shouldn't be diversity, it should be all white workers or whatever the hell they're saying.
It's a good point, and that's the main focus that you hear in right-wing media. Like it's all they focus on.
I know this is a little too conspiratorial, but I almost think Buttigieg said that so that people would get distracted into a culture war issue instead of focusing on the real problem, which is that he's choosing not to regulate these companies.
That's right. I mean, I don't know if he's smart enough or strategic enough to do that on purpose, but either way, don't let anyone trick you into thinking that this story is about anything other than the fact that both corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans are in cahoots in allowing corporations to get away with little regulation that harms all of us, including the people who are living in East Palestine, Ohio.
And last thing, right-wingers. So a lot of you make totally wrong assumptions about us, and they're like, oh yeah, are you gonna criticize Buttigieg and Biden for this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing for the last 2 weeks, right? You know why? Because we do honest reporting. Right now, do you wanna know who did the deregulation in the first place? Donald Trump. Now that doesn't mean Biden's not guilty, it doesn't mean Buttigieg and Obama aren't guilty. Obama should have pushed harder too, right? But why are you guys so weirdly biased that they're like, oh yeah, Obama should have pushed harder to protect us, but Trump was totally right in stripping away all of our safety regulations so that we could get bombed in the middle of Ohio, and then Biden was at fault for not bringing those regulations back that Trump wiped away. Come on, you can't be that biased. I mean, Trump bragged all the time, I'm gonna take away all the regulations. If you have one, I'm gonna take away 2. What do you think he was doing that for, to help you? No, that leads to giant flame balls over Ohio. He was doing it to help his own donors, just like the Democrats. It was those companies that are donating to him.
We're not done with this story because there is a lot of heat that President Joe Biden should be taking for this as well. So when we come back, I'm gonna tell you how he has decided to take the side of Norfolk Southern in a case that the Supreme Court is going to make a decision about very soon. That and more coming right up.
sexual temptation.
Oh.
All right, back on TYT here. Lots of interesting comments in the member section. TYT.com/join and become a member. RFK wrote in, oh, he's back. Wrote in, thank you for a great anniversary show. And I just joined the lever yesterday. So I'm glad you did that. Support any progressive outlet that's actually bringing you honest reporting, okay? And look at that, right? If we were on the right, all we would ever do is attack the left, right? We're on the left and we're totally honest about the left and the right, right? I mean, there's a giant, and the mainstream media, are they ever honest about the left or the right? No, they love their corporate agenda. Anyway, you get it. Thank you for being a member. Lynn said, Buttigieg has to learn that clapping back on Fox is not enough. He actually has to do his job.
Yep.
Oh, no, but in DC, they're like, oh my God, did you see how he clapped back on the Fox? Oh, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. He should definitely be the next president. And by the way, guys, maybe I'm wrong, right? But the mainstream Democrats that I know, they love Buttigieg, okay? And where do they get that idea from? Because they watch CNN and read New York Times and etc., right? And those guys have such enormous propaganda on behalf of that guy. And by the way, hey, idiot mainstream reporters who refuse to criticize him under penalty of law, thinking that we're biased. What are we trying to hurt his chances in 2028? Are we like the greatest four-dimensional chess players of all time that we're planning like 5 years ahead of time? Who the hell knows what's gonna happen in 2028? We're just being honest about what kind of a job he's doing. It's called reporting, you should look into it. Anyway, Navinex says, even worse, Pete wanted to be president. That's like your 8-year-old thinking they already run Coca-Cola after running a lemonade stand one weekend. But enabled by the press. Mountain Dragon says, Jank, Anna, and TYT fam, it's been a pretty rough year so far, but I'm truly happy to be with a family that helps each other out and looks forward to enriching the soul of the world. Not only do we have the best information and resources from TYT, but we also have the best community in the world. TYT strong, love you all. Thank you. Look, guys, some folks have been saying this lately, just like all of a sudden, there was like this kind of recognition in my personal life from like fans and other folks that I know, all of a sudden saying, you know what? I think you guys are kind of doing, like trying to bring a little bit of light into the world, right? Because a lot of folks like see us yelling and they think like, oh yeah, those guys must be radicals, right? They sometimes fight for their viewers and the voters and stuff. That's a wrong radical, blah. And all of a sudden people are like, but wait a minute, this looks like they're actually fighting to help people. So thank you for that recognition, we appreciate it. Yeah, of course, that's what we're doing. Greyhound Dragon says, hello TYT fam, feeling pretty good right now. Just cut off over 12 inches of my hair. We'll be donating to Wigs for Kids. Look at this, look at all the wonderful people in the TYT community. Dragon with a Girl Tattoo says, I have to wear a helmet when I ride my bicycle, but they can't regulate the brakes on trains carrying toxic chemicals. Okay, that's such a good point. And that's why they make you use the paper straws and they make you do all these things. Meanwhile, they let the corporations trash the planet. All right, back on TYT, Jake and Anna with you guys. Hey, Dragon with a Girl Tattoo and Mickey C, who are both members. I read your comments, they're both excellent. And so $100 Blue Apron gift card for you guys. If you're a member, you can win that from time to time for great comments. Rewards at tyt.com to verify who you are and you'll get that card. Thank you for being part of the show, Casper.
Well, we've got more on rail companies. Joe Biden has decided to side with rail company Norfolk Southern when it comes to a case that the Supreme Court will be making a decision about very soon. Now, it has to do with lawsuits brought against rail companies, either by former employees or individuals living in a community that have been devastated by a train derailment. Now, at the heart of this case is the question of jurisdiction of lawsuits. And if Norfolk Southern gets its way, it'll be far easier for rail companies to block lawsuits against them. And the most disheartening part about all of this, and you really shouldn't be surprised when you learn about Biden's pro-corporate history, is that Biden is siding with the rail companies here. So let me give you the details. In the case against Norfolk Southern, the Biden administration is siding with the railroad in its conflict with a cancer-stricken former rail worker. A high court ruling for the rail company could create a national precedent limiting where workers and consumers can bring cases against corporations. Now, as The Lever reports, and really The Lever is the only outlet I've seen do incredible, robust coverage of this, the lawsuit in question, filed initially in a Pennsylvania county court in 2017, deals with a state law that permits plaintiffs to file suit against any corporation registered to do business there, even if the actions that gave rise to the case occurred elsewhere. And I think that law makes all the sense in the world. Because think about it, if a business, if a company like Norfolk Southern is registered to do business in Pennsylvania, well, someone living in Pennsylvania should be able to sue the rail company, even if what occurred happened in another state. And that's what this particular case, or that's what this particular plaintiff is arguing here. The case has to do with a former worker for Norfolk Southern, a carman named Robert Mallory, who was diagnosed with colon cancer. In the suit, he claims that the illness resulted from exposure from toxic chemicals like asbestos. And so he claims that the rail company failed to provide the proper safety equipment and take other steps to ensure his safety. So he files the suit in the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas, even though he had never worked in that state. The reason why he wants to file the suit in Pennsylvania is because his lawyers are from Pennsylvania and because he believes that he would get the fairest access to justice there. Now, Pennsylvania has what's known as a consent by registration statute, something states have had on the books since the early 19th century, which stipulates that when corporations register to do business in the state, they're also consenting to be governed by the state's courts. Norfolk Southern asserts that being forced to defend the case in Pennsylvania would pose an undue burden, thereby violating its constitutional right to due process. I'm gonna let you jump in, Cenk.
Yeah, so look guys, this forum shopping is a thing that happens on both sides, and you can make an effective argument against it. So for example, let's say that there was an accident in Pennsylvania and the guy's from Minnesota and the company's from Virginia. You can sue in any of those three states normally, right? But what if that guy that got injured sues in Hawaii? And you're like, I don't know if that makes sense, right? Okay, so far you say, well, maybe the companies are right? Hold. So a lot of companies, on the other hand, make it very clear in their contracts that the contract must be guided by the state that they're incorporated in, usually Delaware, right? Why? Because the Delaware courts are incredibly friendly to corporations.
That's right.
So they do forum shopping as a matter of course. Almost all companies do this, okay? And then on top of that, this particular company has filed several lawsuits in Pennsylvania. So now they're turning around and going, how dare this guy file a suit in Pennsylvania? Well, you did the same exact thing. So they're literally saying we should be able to do it, but no one we hurt should have the same rights as this beloved corporation, which should have more than human rights.
So as The Lever reports, even though the rail company Norfolk Southern owns thousands of miles of track in the Keystone State, the Philadelphia County Court sided with the railroad and actually dismissed the case. But Mallory appealed, and the case wound its way through state and federal courts before landing at the United States Supreme Court just last year. And in the coming months, the Supreme Court is poised to issue its ruling on this case, considering the pro-corporate judges that have been confirmed in recent years, judges like Neil Gorsuch, whose previous rulings make it abundantly clear that even if an employee's life is at risk, he'll still side with the corporation over the employee who very clearly has a valid claim against the company.
Yeah, so get a load of this. So of course, Biden being theoretically on the left and a Democrat should support the workers, right? I mean, that's what the Democratic Party is known for. Republican Party is known for protecting the rich, right? Historically, this has been the case all the way back to FDR, right? And so instead they jump in here, as Anna explained, on the side of the companies and against the workers. But but here's the interesting part. They really have almost nothing to do with this case. So they butted into the case in a way that was nonsensical, just to jump in and protect the companies. So get a load of this. This is amazing. Elena Kagan, who is of course a Supreme Court justice, and one that's from the left, Obama nominated her, asked the government, hey, what in the world are you guys doing here? In fact, we have an exact quote. She asked, Mr. Gannon, the Solicitor General has a choice whether to participate in this suit or not. And so please don't take this as at all a criticism. By the way, go ahead and criticize your Supreme Court justice. Anyway, but she continues, it's genuine interest and curiosity. What is it about this suit that has made you decide to participate? That's the Supreme Court justice on their side going, what are you doing here? And why did you randomly decide to help these corporations for no reason?
No, but Cenk, the response is so telling. The response to her question. So Curtis Gannon, the Deputy Solicitor General, responded to her. Sorry, weird.
That was hilarious.
Slip. Anyway, so he says this. We pointed out not just that the excessive availability of general jurisdiction could cause international concerns for trade with the United States and our commercial interests. Guys, this is all that matters to them, okay? The trade, the commercial interests. But let me continue with the rest of that, okay? But also the petitioner had called into question the constitutionality of a federal statute. And so we thought it was important to make sure that the court's decision here wouldn't implicate the constitutionality of federal statutes.
Yeah, in other words, we're here to help corporations.
Yep.
What part of that was confusing, right? And it's actually refreshingly naive of Justice Kagan to be like, why did you show up here to randomly defend corporations? Because they're owned by them? You don't know that? Mm-hmm. and to be fair to her, she lives in Washington. And in Washington, there's this giant thick bubble around the place where they tell everyone all the time, oh, these politicians, they have your best interest in mind, right? The right-wing media will tell you that the right-wing politicians have your best interest. Mainstream media will tell you corporate Republicans and Democrats have your best interest. And so they're like, huh, why are they randomly defending a company for no reason at all? Well, it's not for no reason. It's because of the bribes. It's the bribes. It's obvious.
Exactly. Well, we've got a lot more news to get to, including a pretty devastating update to the Tesla unionization effort that I covered yesterday. We'll give you that update and more. And after that, we've got a lot more to get to, including how private equity firms are now looking to evict elderly people from age-restricted housing.
And one more that I got to tell you guys about. I forgot to tell you at the beginning. Speaking of solicitor genitals,
no.
Has penis size across the world gone up or down? A shocking study.
Concerning, let's just say that.
All right, we'll come back.
Elon.
Sexual temptation.
Oh.
All right, back on TYT. Let's start with Super Chat. Pitchforks Dragon says about Buttigieg, he has no excuse. Sorry, Pete, but those are the breaks. That pun was intended. Okay.
Dems the breaks.
Oh, that's another one. Okay, tough break. Okay, Alpha Dog writes in the YouTube member section. I understand that we have to do away with legalized bribery. My question is, how do we do it, and how long will it take? So, well, first of all, this is how you do it: wolf-pac.com. Okay, so Wolfpack is a group that's trying to get money out of politics. Number two, I started that group in 2011. Here we are, a dozen years later. Still working on it, brothers, so I can't give you a timeline on it. But the number one thing that we need is a national conversation around it. Like the Republicans can start a national conversation around M&M cartoons, very, very literally, right? And then the whole country will debate M&M cartoons, right? We have all those progressive legislators. Their number one mission in going into Congress was to start a national conversation about money in politics. Every one of them refuses to do it because it would offend their colleagues. So I'm being honest with you guys. If one of them went on a warpath on it, it would change the entire dynamic of American politics. But every single one of them refuses to do it. It's the most maddening thing you've ever seen. Okay, Fortnite Pro, AKA Beacon Dragon says, I'm sorry I voted for Biden, but what was my other choice? No, guys, look, them's the breaks, right?
Yeah, that's
In
right.
this horrible, corrupt system, you always have two terrible choices, right? So, and then you have to pick the least terrible. Trump would have and tried to end democracy. So yeah, you gotta go with Biden. I don't feel guilty about that 1%. What was I supposed to do, go with Trump? No way, right? So the real problem is primaries, we gotta win in primaries.
Yes.
And every single person in power, including everyone on TV, is like, Democrats shouldn't have primaries. That's divisive, it hurts the party, it hurts the unit, don't do primaries. So you can have the two most horrible choices in the world to choose from, and all of us corporations will celebrate, okay? No, primary the living hell out of them. And by the way, progressives, if you're out there and one day you run for office and you win, can you actually do what you said you were gonna do? Instead of getting comfortable, all right, I said it. Schultz C41 says, I kind of poked fun at the low-tech Chinese spy balloon, but Civil War era breaks? I know, right? They're not fixing anything as long as it costs a dime to fix it. That's why we're falling apart at the seams. Michael Gonzalez says, and by the way, just to be clear, the technology's from the Civil War, okay? Michael Gonzalez says, Anna Buttigieg is like Jamie or Jaime from Yellowstone?
Jamie, oh yeah, Jamie, yeah, good comparison.
Okay, Tamir Shamel says, good evening, TYT fam. How many train derailments are we up to for the week? Actually, at least 3. Somebody in the member section is reporting one in Detroit. Other members reported one in Arizona 2 days ago. C. Hendrickson said, the lever absolutely rocks. Sorota's a national treasure, here. And here it is, Yeatwood Mac on Twitch said, there was another hazardous waste train derailment today outside of Detroit.
That's right.
Also by Norfolk Southern, 6 cars off the tracks. Deregulation will kill us all if we don't step in. And meanwhile, Buttigieg is stepping in to protect them, not you.
But them's the breaks. But them's the breaks.
Back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Elizabeth Wilson with you guys. Obviously, Elizabeth joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. And Holy Beer Dragon gifted 5 subs because they're a wonderful human being on Twitch. We appreciate it. Casper.
Well, we have a pretty terrible update to a story we covered yesterday. Tesla has now fired dozens of employees in Buffalo, New York specifically, just one day after workers at that specific facility announced their intention to unionize. Now, the workers have filed a complaint with the National Labor Relations Board, and considering the National Labor Relations Board is much better under the Biden administration relative to other administrations, they might have a shot at justice here. We'll see. But at the same time, Tesla is also voluntarily recalling more than 360,000 cars that were marketed as full self-driving vehicles because it turns out they're not full self-driving vehicles. We'll get to those details in a moment, but before we do, here are the details on the firings. In a filing with the United States National Labor Relations Board, the Union Workers United accused Tesla of illegally terminating the employees in retaliation for union activity and to discourage union activity. The union asked the labor board to seek a federal court injunction to prevent irreparable destruction of employee rights resulting from Tesla's unlawful conduct. Now, Workers United successfully organized hundreds of Starbucks workers or hundreds of Starbucks stores just last year. So they've been down this road before. They have successfully filed complaints against Starbucks with the NLRB. Now, an organizing committee of 25 employees who labeled data for Tesla's autopilot system sent an email to Musk early Tuesday morning of this week with their intention to unionize, and surprise, surprise, then a bunch of them got fired. Now, several of the terminated employees had been involved in labor discussions, and at least one of them was actually a member of the organizing committee. Now, one United Workers organizer told Bloomberg this: "This is a form of collective retaliation against the group of workers that started this organizing effort. The terminations are designed to terrify everyone about potential consequences of them organizing, as well as to attempt to cull the herd." Now, real quick, just a refresher on what the workers wanted to unionize for. These are individuals who analyze the autopilot systems on these vehicles, an incredibly important job. They were paid $19 an hour for this incredibly important job. Now, compare that pay to what Tesla charges for their vehicles and how much money they bring in. Aside from that, they wanted to be able to take some time off. They're burnt out, overworked, which probably doesn't bode well for workers who are tasked with an incredibly important job having to do with the autopilot system. And then the other thing is they're all being surveilled, right? So there's software implemented on the computers that they're using on a regular basis that keeps track of their keystrokes to make sure they're constantly working and that they don't take breaks. And so they want to unionize in order to change the working conditions in addition to the pay. Cenk.
So in this case, the workers explain why the layoffs were so extraordinary, different than other layoffs. And it's a very compelling case, right? So they announced that you're going to do a union, and then all of a sudden, a mass layoff of those specific people, including a couple others, but mainly targeting them, it appears. It's not that subtle, but that's the thing about Elon Musk. He's not trying to be subtle, he's trying to be the opposite. In fact, let me tell you about another case. In a bipartisan group of US labor board members ruled in 2021, and remember, bipartisan, Republicans love Elon Musk now, but even the Republicans were like, okay, said that Tesla repeatedly violated federal law in Fremont, including by, quote, coercively interrogating union supporters and firing one because of his activism. Tesla has, of course, denied wrongdoing and is appealing that ruling. And so that, by the way, even that last statement gives you a sense of why this is happening. Musk seems to have made the decision, just fire him. Fire him, violate whatever you got to do. It doesn't matter, we have a ton of lawyers. We'll just drag it out in the courts, right? And the amount of money that we pay to the lawyers will be less than we would pay to the workers if they were unionized and actually had leverage and power and earned what they're actually supposed to earn and can earn for what we charge, right? So that's just a math calculation that he did.
That's right.
So it appears he's screwing over these workers very much on purpose.
Right, and I mean, he has made his position on organized labor clear over and over and over again. He's against unionized workers. He has said as much. He has made it clear that he's just not in favor of it. And we all know why that is, right? Especially with a company like Tesla. Workers unionizing means that they have a seat at the table, they're able to negotiate their pay, their working conditions, and how some of those profits are distributed within that company. And he's not in favor of that. Now, at the same time, again, I want to reiterate, when it comes to something that Elon Musk really wants to market his cars on, right? The driverless technology, you want to make sure that you respect your workers, you treat them well, they're not exhausted, but that's not the case here. And I think the chickens have come home to roost because it turns out that Tesla is voluntarily recalling 362,758 vehicles equipped with the company's experimental driver assistance software. There have been all sorts of incredibly dangerous situations, crashes. We've talked about some of them. But for instance, if one of these vehicles is in a left turn lane, the vehicle doesn't recognize it and continues to go straight through the intersection. Okay, so that's one example of what they've experienced with this technology. What's hilarious about this though is that Elon Musk is recalling these vehicles but doesn't want us to call it a recall. What do you think it is?
Yeah, everybody knows what it is. Okay, guys, it is rather remarkable that these stories are on the same day. He fires the workers working on it and goes, oh, by the way, yeah, it's a disaster. Gee, I wonder maybe it has something to do with you, treating the workers who are creating it so poorly and working under such terrible conditions. Guys, look, there's this disparity. Some of you guys work in companies that are, maybe they're mom and pops or whatever, and they treat you well, right? But you don't know what your brothers and sisters are going through in these giant corporations. And so I just talked to a viewer recently, and he was telling me about some things that happen in enormous corporations. It's just mind-numbing how much injustice there are at those places and how little rights any of the workers have, right? But this one also made me think of that because they're monitoring the number of clicks on your keyboard. Man, they're watching you for like a hawk every second that you're in. It is so oppressive. I get depressed thinking about it, right? And then when anybody goes, can we please get like a bathroom break or something? They're like, you're fired, right? This is what corporate rule looks like, and it ain't pretty.
Definitely is not. All right, well, let's move on to another story. This one is so incredibly tragic. It shows you how this profit-making machine does not care about anyone, including the elderly. In what is only the latest nightmare of late-stage capitalism, Wall Street investors are now dumping money into housing that is restricted specifically for elderly individuals. Now, this is housing for elderly individuals who do not want to live in nursing homes. And considering they're retired, considering they're elderly, they're on fixed income, so their ability to afford housing is limited, to say the least. Now, what we're seeing is that these Wall Street investors are going in and snatching up this real estate, which again is really, really important to maintain for these individuals. Now, age-targeted rental housing is an alternative, again, for seniors who don't want to live in nursing homes. A series of high-profile horror stories about Wall Street-owned nursing homes has led to increased scrutiny from regulators, including an ongoing probe by the Government Accountability Office and a mention in President Joe Biden's 2022 State of the Union address, where he said that nursing home profiteering ends on my watch. And by the way, the nursing homes were destroyed by Wall Street investors, which is part of the reason why retired folks, elderly individuals are looking for housing elsewhere, including the age-restricted housing. Now Wall Street is gobbling up that housing, those rental units as well. Here's Rebecca Burns of The Lever, of course, because they're doing such great reporting here, explaining how a company known as Welltower, the world's largest healthcare real estate investment trust, or REIT, is buying up all of these apartments with their own retirement money. So Americans' retirement savings are a major source of the capital that Welltower deploys to acquire and wring profits from senior housing and healthcare properties. As a publicly traded real estate investment trust, the company's shareholders include major mutual funds and more than a dozen state pension funds. So Cenk, some of these investing instruments and all of that can be a little complicated and complex to understand. Can you break it down for us a little more?
Yeah, so what they'll do a lot of times is and every situation is different, but they'll basically borrow money because that gives them more leverage. So if you only have $100 to deal with, obviously hypothetical here with much lower numbers, you can only buy $100 worth of property. But a lot of times they'll leverage and they'll go, okay, I'll use $100 to borrow $1,000 or $10,000, and I'll go buy these properties. Now, but then at that point, when you leverage, you have interest costs, right? You have to pay interest for the money that you borrowed. Well, how are you going to make up for that? Well, you're going to take the properties that you bought at a certain price and you're going to increase the prices, whether it's rent or you're selling later, right? And then you have to add a massive profit margin on top to make it worthwhile. So when the private equity buys these homes, it is inevitable in the rental case that they will drive up your rent significantly. They must do it to maximize profit. In fact, there's an executive in this story that admits it, okay? To give you a sense of scale, one of the people that worked, bought one of these rented in one of these places said that they were assured that they would get about a 2 to 5% rent increase. And he thought, well, okay, that sounds somewhat reasonable. We're on a limited budget. And remember, you're supposed to spend only a third of your income, whatever it is, on housing, right? So they budget for that and they're like, okay, and they're very careful with his wife, et cetera. And then they come in and go 39% increase.
Yeah, that's right. Well, to elderly people. So they get evicted. They can't afford the rent. And they're out on the streets. What are they supposed to do exactly?
Yeah, and well, Calamar executive, Calamar is one of the companies that does this, okay, said this is a devastating quote. To operate, we need to cover those expenses. Unfortunately, we're passing them on to you.
No, but what expenses? What expenses? Because the age-restricted housing is like the private equity firms, the investors love it because it doesn't come along with the labor costs that nursing homes have, right? So they can really maximize their profits. So what exactly are they referring to when they say that? What costs?
Well, the funny thing is they admitted the cost. They said it was, in this case, they're like, inflation has driven up costs. Our costs could be up to 9%. Now, first of all, they might still be referring to interest and this financial scheme that they set up in the first place. But even if it's 9%, you didn't raise their rents 9%. You raised them 39%. They're just brutal. And they're saying it, they told it to the residents. Because they're like, what are you, is the government gonna protect you? No, we bought off all the politicians.
In fact,
there's not a goddamn thing you could do. That guy added at the end, this is an executive talking to the people that live there. We have to show that revenue. We have no option. And that's what I tell you, that's what we both tell you guys all the time. Like even today, Bernie in another story said, we gotta fight corporate greed. And he did a great job, we'll explain that later. But it isn't greed. They all have to be as greedy as possible. That's called maximizing profit.
It's how the system works.
That's literally their mission. So here's an executive saying, well, of course we crushed you and took as much of your money as possible. We had to, we don't have an option. We had to maximize profits. So sad day for you guys, we screwed you.
They have a fiduciary responsibility, Cenk.
Yep.
Right? Now, I should also note that not only is the federal government failing us when they refuse to regulate industry or these private equity firms, it's even worse than that because sometimes they provide the money for these investments, which then victimize people like these elderly people who are being evicted from their homes. So while paying little in corporate taxes, Welltower has received more than $65 million in federal COVID-19 relief funds earmarked for healthcare providers, according to quarterly earnings reports, after spending at least $300,000 lobbying the federal government on issues including allocation of the funds. Because guys, that's their investment, okay? And they got a sweet return. Invest $300,000 in lobbying, and the federal government will write you a check for $65 million in COVID relief.
Again, to be fair to these companies, bribery is now legal. So you're kind of nuts not to give a $300,000 bribe if you're gonna get 65 million back. Wouldn't you do it? That's why we have to fix the system. Wolf-pack.com, get the money out. Otherwise, this is gonna happen to everybody. All right, so the last one here, because that same company, Welltower, this is so brazen now. We live under such corporate rule, corporations are rubbing it in your face. They wrote a business update last June saying that they expect, quote, significant future growth in the wellness housing platform. Now, one of the reasons they said was because it, quote, operates with low to no staffing. So first of all, they're like, oh, just bring them in, bring them, don't give them anything, okay? You don't need, especially compared to nursing homes. I know nursing homes have a lot more staff by nature, right? But here they're basically bragging about how they're not gonna give you anything.
Right.
But wait, that's the least problematic part. Then they go on to say, this is amazing, quote, seniors housing, and this is in all caps, is not income dependent. Meaning we got these seniors where we want them. They don't have a choice. They explain in the paper, most of these folks have already sold their homes. They can't go back.
Oh my God.
So if they're renting from us, moving out, especially because they're seniors, is going to be prohibitive for them. And the move out costs alone might break them. So we have them trapped. So it is not income dependent. Just charge them more. And they know they're on limited income, but they're like, so what? They'll eat less.
Jesus.
This is late stage capitalism. So this isn't capitalism, this is corporate capture of a government. We are run not by democracy, not by politicians, we're run by their donors, which are corporations. And now they're rubbing it in our face, saying they don't have a choice at all. Let's just rob them, let's say it out in public, and then get the government officials, both Democrats and Republicans, to protect us instead of them.
In a lot of ways, this country is one of the most terrifying places to live. Just thinking about what your future is gonna look like. And also keep in mind, I mean, if they privatize Social Security, right? Right now, there's a retirement crisis where most people are not able to save anything for their retirement. What are we gonna do? It's incredibly scary. Anyway, we gotta take a break. When we come back, some positive news, because when you do have politicians fighting on behalf of the American people, it tends to work. Bernie Sanders proves that. We've got that story and more coming right up.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now, these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like. tyt.com/join and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey. Hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this? No, I just took a picture. I'm bitsing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Cenk. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, AKA Woke Bay.
Oh, hi, I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
This is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool, rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? It was a white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it, though.
We've been around for about 20 years and we have about 20 billion views. Am I proud of that? Hell yeah, I am. We put out 20 billion messages in a bottle. Have we helped to move now 2 generations, millennials and Gen Z, to become progressive? Yes, those numbers are real. We moved generations. Were we the only ones? Of course not. But we have been the largest online news show for now decades.
Sexual temptation.
Oh, can't let that happen.
right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and Charlotte Moran with you guys. Charlotte just joined us. Every member makes a difference, allows us to do this reporting honestly, and every member is the Young Turks. So hit that join button below the video if you're on YouTube. Everybody else, tyt.com/join. Of course, that makes sense. Casper.
I love this next story, and it shows you just how much power politicians do have, and if they want to fight for us, it could actually yield great results. A pressure campaign spearheaded by Senator Bernie Sanders led to one pharmaceutical company backing off of their plans to price gouge Americans, which is great news. Now, Sanders is the head of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate, of course, and has the power to call for hearings and investigations into the healthcare industry and big pharma. And so here's the issue at play. Here's what fired him up and what ended up happening when he decided to apply pressure. Moderna had recently announced that they plan to increase the price of the coronavirus vaccine. So that would increase the price of the shots from $110 to $130 a dose. The price, of course, has been nothing, zero, because the federal government had been purchasing the shots on behalf of Americans so Americans can get it for free. They were purchasing the shots for $26 from Moderna. And then you would go to a CVS or a Walgreens or wherever you got your vaccine and you'd get the shot without having to pay for it. Now, of course, the COVID-related emergency measures are going to expire. And at that point, the federal government's gonna do nothing for you, pretty much. And so Moderna was planning on using that as an opportunity to increase their prices for the vaccine. But Bernie Sanders was like, no, I'm not down with that. And here's why. Sanders said Moderna, whose only federally approved drug is the coronavirus vaccine that the company received nearly $2 billion in direct federal money to develop, is a poster child for the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. He plans to argue that the CEO, Stefan Bancel, who Forbes estimates is worth $5 billion, and several other Moderna executives profited off the pandemic. And that's actually true. Also, fun fact, the CEO sold more than $400 million in company stock from the start of the pandemic through March of 2022. The COVID vaccine, I should note, is literally currently Moderna's only commercially available product. So that's the only way the company's really making a lot of money. And so him selling stocks like this, I think is telling. But anyway, Cenk.
Yeah, so look, there's three set of facts that lead to one another. First of all, how much money do these companies spend in lobbying these politicians? So over the past 25 years, the pharmaceutical industry has spent $8.5 billion on lobbying. 8.5 billion. That's not on a product, that's on lobbying politicians to do what they want. So they must be getting a lot of money in return. Hold, we're gonna show you how much they're gonna get. And they also spent another $745 million on campaign contributions. Those are the legalized bribes they just hand to the politicians, let alone all that lobbying effort, which is a lot of times gets funneled to their actual bank accounts, right? My wife, my son happens to be a lobbyist. There's 1,000 different tricks. In fact, this one industry has 1,700 lobbyists. There's only 535 members of Congress. So 3 times as many lobbyists for this one industry as members of Congress.
That's right.
Okay, so all that lobbying, what does it get them? Well, first of all, in the case of Moderna, not true for all the pharmaceutical companies that did the vaccine, but in Moderna's case, well, the government did the research and handed them a couple of $1 billion of research for free.
Yes.
Right? So you'd spend a couple of $100 million lobbying too if you're gonna get a couple billion back. But hold, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We extend their patents, and that allows them to have literally monopolies in markets. And there's so many other ways that the government helps them, including not being able to negotiate drug prices at Medicare. It's unheard of in capitalism that you can't negotiate drug or the price of anything, right? So how much money have they made between 2000 and 2018? The pharmaceutical companies in this country alone, 8 trillion in profits, not revenue, profits, 8 trillion. Well, that's what happens when you have a monopoly and you could charge ridiculous prices. In fact, in this particular case, in the COVID vaccine, Anna told you it costs, they were trying to charge $130 per shot, right? You know how much it costs? $2.85 to manufacture.
I mean, they're just so ridiculous. I mean, this is what they do. This is if they can buy the politicians and game the system, they're gonna do it, and that's what's been happening. Except there's one politician who has proven over and over again that he can't be bought. And that's Senator Bernie Sanders, who is now the head of this incredibly important committee within the Senate. And so he tells the Washington Post this, and I just love the way he simply states the reality of how corporations screw us over in this country. We're going to ask them, he says, when he's referring to the hearing, hey, you made billions of dollars in profit on a vaccine that was developed because of taxpayer support from the National Institutes of Health. You've become a multi-billionaire and you think it's appropriate to cost the federal government even more money by quadrupling prices? Now, here's the other thing I wanted to mention. So Moderna didn't like the pressure campaign. And so they decided to concede to Sanders, okay? So let's get to that, all right? On Wednesday, after its CEO did agree to appear in front of the committee in the Senate, he said that they will provide millions of uninsured and underinsured Americans the vaccine free of cost. And then he says, a spokesperson for Moderna says this, everyone in the United States will have access to Moderna's COVID-19 vaccines regardless of their ability to pay. And then they made the argument that for those who are insured, they'll be covered by their insurance, right? Except Bernie Sanders made such a perfect point. He's like, yeah, except for those who are on Medicare. Because remember, Medicare is funded by the taxpayers. So if Medicare is paying for the vaccine, at the end of the day, it's still the taxpayers who are paying for the vaccine.
Yeah. So how did Bernie do it? How did he get this company to back down and go from trying to charge $130 per shot to $0 per shot? I mean, that is a hell of a thing. I thought, oh my God, they need this money, otherwise you just can't stay in business, right? That's the excuses they use. They use an excuse like, we need that extra money for innovation in the drug industry. You have $8 trillion in profits. How does that not cover innovation, right? So what Bernie did was he pointed out their salaries, not just their profits, okay, but he said that the top 50 executives in the 10 pharmaceutical companies made $1.9 billion in compensation and stock awards.
Oh my God.
Okay, and then they also have golden parachutes when they leave. I mean, do you guys get this at your job when they fire you or you leave?
I freaking better.
They give you a golden parachute. They're like, oh, okay, thank you for working here. You're fired, but here's $30 million. Right?
I mean, I'll take a bronze parachute.
Okay, right. So how much are these guys going to get? Now remember, there's just 50 executives. Their golden parachutes, when they leave, amount to more than $2.8 billion.
That seems fair, yeah.
Okay, so when he started talking about the billions that the executives are taking and stuffing to their pockets by overcharging us, all of a sudden, and called them in front of the committee. Now the guy's gonna have to say it in front of the TV cameras, right? And he naturally thinks, rightfully thinks, hey man, this is a robbery well done. I don't, the extra billion I would make is not that important. I just got to protect the billions I already made. Okay, forget it. It's free. Right. It's free, right?
And look, I want to be clear. If you're one of those people who unfortunately has been propagandized into thinking that you shouldn't get the vaccine, it's not just about the vaccine. Because this is something, this issue has been replicated over and over and over again with all sorts of life-saving prescription drugs. The taxpayers fund the research and development for the drugs. The pharmaceutical companies benefit from it. They turn around and price gouge us on the incredibly important life-saving medications that we need. It happens over and over and over again. My mom was diagnosed with blood cancer just last year. She needed to take a chemo medication known as Revlimid. Revlimid was founded decades and decades and decades ago. But the federal government, which is completely captured by the pharmaceutical companies, kept extending the patent. Extending. Luckily, they finally allowed for one other company to create a generic version of it, but there's only 2 companies producing this life-saving drug that my mom needs. Her body doesn't produce, her bone marrow doesn't produce hemoglobin. Without it, she's gone. And the cost out of pocket, okay, Medicare didn't cover it entirely, $2,500 a month for that drug, okay?
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's what we see happening with all sorts of drugs. And Bernie Sanders holding this guy's feet to the fire, again, isn't just about the vaccine. It's about making a statement about how things work in this country, how the corruption leads to this robbery of the American people. And then one final thing I'll say, you should really compare Democrats and Republicans when it comes to the investigations they're prioritizing. So when you go to the House of Representatives, which is now dominated by Republicans, they're gonna do investigations too on Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah.
Okay, in the Senate, you have Bernie Sanders doing investigations and hearings of pharmaceutical companies that have been screwing you over for decades. Okay, Bill Cassidy, who's a Republican from Louisiana, says this. The ranking Republican on his committee, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, told the Washington Post this month that he wanted to hear more from Pfizer and Moderna before passing judgment on their decisions to hike prices.
In other words, I get paid by them and I'm gonna protect them.
Bingo.
There isn't a single Republican senator who isn't a crook. They all take millions in campaign contributions and represent those corporations instead of you guys. By the way, that's also true of the majority of Democrats. Okay, so that leads me to my final 2 points. Look, on top of being a talk show host here, I run the company, so I'm a businessman, so I know how this works, okay? So you're supposed to try to hit a 15% margin so that you can be sustainable, et cetera. You get a 25% margin, you do run a great business. Congrats, brother, you did well, right? That price hike from $2.85 to $130, you know what the profit margin on that is? Not the price hike, but the fact that it cost them only $2.85 and they wanted to charge $130. That's a 4,500% margin. That's not capitalism. No one can get a 4,500% return on investment. No one could have that kind of margin unless you've captured the government. And then at that point, the government helps protect your outrageous price gouging of the American people. And what did Biden do? So of course Trump, when he was campaigning, said, "Oh, I'm gonna make sure that Medicare negotiates drug prices." And then he got in office. He said, "Oh no, I'm not doing that, man. It turns out they give a lot of money to me, right?" And what did Biden do? "Oh, I'm going to." And Obama, same thing. "Oh, I'm going to make sure they're going to negotiate drug prices." Liars. They're all liars. And instead, he came in and he regulated insulin for only people on Medicare and 9 other drugs, like what is it, 3-4 years from now, okay? And the thousands of other drugs. He's like, don't touch the beloved pharmaceutical companies. We're gonna protect their profits and pretend we did something when all we did was a smokescreen to help them out. Who's the only guy who actually fights for you and gets things done? Bernie Sanders. And so he single-handedly did this.
Yeah.
And what do we tell you guys all the time? Public pressure works. The reason we tell the progressive legislators and everybody else to pick a fight is not because of histrionics. It's because it creates public pressure, right? And that actually focuses people's attention. It gets the people in power nervous and they back off, okay? This is a perfect case study in it. By the way, even to Bernie though, public pressure against your colleagues would also work. So I love what you're doing with the companies. Thank you for being the only person in Washington representing us and getting results. But if you turn that ire towards your corrupt colleagues, you would get 10 times the results, 100 times the results.
We got to take a break. When we come back, looks like Ronnie Boy's in a little bit of trouble. Looks like his book bans are starting to backfire a little bit, and we'll tell you why when we come back.
All right, back during the social break here. First couple of corrections and challenges from the audience, love it. Dragon Bat wrote in on Super Chat saying, correction, the Arizona crash was a tractor trailer. So yesterday, a couple of our members said, hey, there was this, it looked like a derailment in Arizona. We're getting noticed about it as we were live on air. And I read their comments for you guys. I mentioned it earlier in the show too, but that turned out to be a tractor trailer. Thank you for pointing that out. I love it when you guys help us get the correct information out there. All right, Parker wrote in saying, Cenk, sorry, but it's not 100% true that progressives in Congress never call out money influencing colleagues. AOC has done it about Manchin and Exxon lobbyists. So yes, every time they do it, Jamal Bowman also did it once on cable news. We go crazy. We're like, yes, yes, da, 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 da,
yeah, because when AOC did it, by the way, Manchin later went on CNN and was asked about his corruption during that interview. So it has a multiplier effect. It's just that you need to be persistent with that, right?
Yeah, at that point, Rashida Tlaib should have jumped in, Cori Bush should have jumped in, et cetera. And they all should have said the same thing. And it shouldn't be like one thing you just kind of throw out there in a cable news thing and then run away, right? No, you should pound it home. Why is he taking the money? Why is he taking the money? Do you think the ExxonMobil money affects Joe Manchin or doesn't it? I'm asking you, Jake Tapper, do you think it affects him? Are you absurd? Why don't you ask him if it affects him, right?
And by the way, listen, it's very clear to me that the one thing that cable news shows love and they're constantly seeking out is drama, conflict.
Yes.
So if AOC is willing to call out a fellow Democrat on his corruption, oh, they love the drama.
Yeah.
So take advantage of that.
It's amazing that they're not taking advantage of it. It's amazing. Yeah. And to be fair to AOC and Bowman, the two people I mentioned, they're the two who did it once on cable news. So, okay, it's a start, right? So all the other legislators, where are you? Katie Porter, you're running for senator in California. I've never seen you challenge a colleague in my life. I like Katie Porter a lot, right? But even the best of them are brainwashed into do not ever fight back against corrupt Democratic colleagues. James Bishop says, I live within a half mile of tracks run by Union Pacific. I've seen engines catch fire and where you cannot see the end of them. Most of my town's residential areas are against the tracks. Yeah, I got news for you, brother. They don't care what the citizens think at all. And so, but thank you for writing in with your experience. Patricia Kumar said, I can see why self-driving cars would be so appealing, but if you're just gonna put them out in the streets and not take any precautions, so maddening. Patricia, of course that's right. I mean, my God, we're so careful about everything we do here, right? And we're a tiny little company. This giant mega company is like, self-driving cars, hopefully it'll work out. Okay, there we go, roll them out. What?
But also, why are municipalities allowing them to experiment with these vehicles on the road?
Good question. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT Cenk and Anna with you guys. Also, Ralph Marino. Ralph, thanks for joining. We appreciate it, brother.
Well, we've got an interesting update out of Florida, so let's discuss. Governor Ron DeSantis is now trying to distance himself from book bans that might be leading to some backlash against him from people who typically support him as governor of Florida. Now, just to backtrack for a second before I give you the details on the book and why people might be upset about it being taken off school library shelves or school shelves. Remember, Ron DeSantis has really branded himself as this warrior against books that are dangerous to kids, books that might have sexual content within them. And so he has essentially passed down this executive order that does away with certain books with this false pretense that the books have sexual content within them. Oftentimes the books that are being taken down library shelves or school classroom shelves are books that are written by African-American authors, LGBTQ authors. You guys get the point. Well, the latest thing that happened had to do with a book that was obviously not objectionable, led to backlash, and then it led to him distancing himself and blaming teachers for what happened. So let's take a look at that video and I'll give you the details.
This is trying to create some narrative as if that they hadn't even put the books out yet to begin with. So there's no need for all of that stuff. What they're trying to do is they're trying to act like somehow, we don't want books. Now, there is longstanding Florida law that prohibits an adult from giving a school child pornography. But don't we think that that's inappropriate to do? But that's been the law for a long time. So when they hear you, when they start chirping about that, understand they're talking about longstanding Florida law that's trying to protect young children. So I think they're trying to do things to virtue signal. I think it's all politically motivated. But anytime you hear about something that seems so outlandish, just understand they're manufacturing that to try to create a narrative.
The teachers are manufacturing it to try to create a narrative, right? And he says that Republicans are only interested in banning porn. Except it's curious because a day after that press conference, this news broke. George Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene co-sponsor federal book ban bill. The Trump supporters have co-sponsored a bill that could be used to ban books by LGBTQ+ authors in schools. If a book is simply written by an author who is part of the LGBTQ+ community, doesn't mean that by the nature of the author, it's gonna be porn. But Republicans would have you think that based on the types of books they're having teachers take off shelves. Now, understand that DeSantis's executive order would legally punish teachers who are offering books that they deem objectionable. So that's gonna lead to a panic, and that's gonna lead to schools taking down all sorts of books from their shelves to review them to ensure that they're not in the future legally liable for providing books that might be deemed inappropriate by lawmakers in Florida, right? But the book that has now led to some backlash is actually a children's book written by legendary baseball player Roberto Clemente, okay? Puerto Rican baseball player. And I know a thing or two about Florida and the Latino community there, including the Puerto Ricans, the Cubans, the Dominicans. They love baseball. Baseball is a huge part of their lives, a huge part of their culture. My husband is Cuban. He lived in South Florida. He was a professional baseball player. Like, it is everything to them. They know who Roberto Clemente was, okay? So like the idea that his book needs to be banned is ridiculous. And I'm guessing that that's where the backlash is really coming from. And these are people who typically do vote for DeSantis. In fact, I looked this up because I was curious. Puerto Ricans living in Florida, did they mostly vote for DeSantis for governor? And it turns out, yeah, that is the case. According to NBC exit polling data, 54% of Puerto Rican voters chose DeSantis for a second term, which was a 20% increase from 2018.
Yeah, so let's just go over hilarious facts here. So he says, this is outrageous, they're saying we're banning books. But wait, there's 1.6 million books that have to be reviewed now by your politically correct Gestapo and say, oh, that one supports black people out, that one supports gay people out, or doesn't even support them, mentions them, pornography out, right? But wait, who passed that law? You passed that law. So, okay, then say, you know what, those 1.6 million books that were already in libraries, people had been reading them for decades and nobody raised any issues at all with them. So now all of us to put them back in then. Just say, no, it's okay. And hey, if you find one that's objectionable, we'll take it out afterwards. But don't worry, we're not gonna sue you guys or anything like. You know what the law is? You know why a lot of the people are librarians, teachers, etc., administrators are panicking? Because they can be personally sued.
Yes.
And so what DeSantis did was unleashed his right-wing dogs against teachers. And he said, now you can go make a buck off of these teachers. And if you catch them, putting a book out there that's got a gay person or a black person that's complaining a little too much about racism, boom, you hit them and you bankrupt them, you take all their money and ruin their lives. That's the law you passed. Be honest about it. What else does it do? That's what it does. That's why they're panicking and taking all the books off the shelves. Meanwhile, as they're saying, oh, we're not banning books. Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene are like, we're banning books. Okay.
On a federal level, right?
Yeah, it's so Orwellian.
It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And by the way, I want to go to graphic 4 here because, of course, look, if you're a teacher, think about how teachers are treated in this country, especially places like Florida, right? Think about what the pay is for a teacher. Getting sued would be devastating for a teacher. So they're gonna panic and be extra cautious because they don't want to get sued by the incredibly sensitive bigots in the state of Florida who are gonna see a black author or an LGBTQ author and freak out about it. And so, but let's talk about the extent of books that need to be reviewed in Florida right now. A spokesperson for the Duval School District pointed out that Clementi's book is one of 1.6 million titles under review following the state's restrictive new laws, which have impacted teachers' ability to teach about topics including race, gender, and sexuality in Florida.
Okay.
It's a lot of books. And we've shown you what classrooms look like. So here's one classroom in Manatee County, Florida, where they've literally covered the shelves with construction paper in order to prevent students from being able to access them.
No, guys, we're all collateral damage in the cultural war.
Yes.
Okay, so this looks like the exact picture that we showed you 2 days ago when left-wingers in a college complained, oh, that art about Muslims, by the way, from a Muslim artist, offends us as Muslims. So you have to put a veil over it. I mean, the irony is so rich, right? So that's left-wing radicals. There aren't that many of them in the country, but they're having an outsized media effect, right? Covering up art. And here's the right-wing radicals in Florida covering up books. Make sure the kids don't learn anything, cover up all the books, right? And we're all stuck in the middle. We just want our kids to get a decent education.
Yes, look, I never thought in a million years I would say this, but things have gotten so extreme and ridiculous that I'm gonna say, like, bring back the normies, please, for God's sake. You know, like, I don't care about your sensitivities. We need to allow expression. We need to celebrate books and the fact that there are school districts that can offer books to students considering how underfunded they are. It is insane that this is where the conversation is in the country right now, but it's all meant to be a distraction. And the distraction, to be real, has a negative impact on many people. So I'm not minimizing that. But in the effort to distract us from the robbery that the politicians assist corporations in engaging in, I mean, we gotta stop letting them do this. We gotta stop letting them scare conservatives into thinking that teachers are literally showing your kids porn. Come on.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. They believe anything. All right, last thing on this is really interesting. There's a great, interesting point about Clemente being a baseball player and Latino and how that might affect DeSantis' politics in Florida. I hadn't thought of that. And so, but why the Clemente book, right? So he's a well-known athlete. Everybody knows he went through this racism. Even for the right-wingers, it'd be pretty tough to deny that that happened, right? So why is it caught up in this? Well, think about it, guys. DeSantis and the Republicans say, we're banning critical race theory in Florida and any book that mentions it, right? But there actually is no critical race theory being taught in Florida. So then the teachers and the administrators go, okay, we could all be personally sued, but we don't teach that and none of the books teach that, but they're telling us to get rid of books that are about racism. So we're just gonna get rid of all the books about racism because otherwise this law doesn't make any sense and we might lose our livelihood and if we don't get rid of the books on racism. So that's why they did it. What the hell else are they supposed to do?
And by the way, Clemente's book was a children's book that merely mentioned what he experienced with racism as a professional baseball player, okay? And so this is the panic that has been created within school systems within Florida, right? Because if they're not actually teaching critical race theory, then what else are they gonna interpret from what DeSantis and the other right-wing politicians in the state are saying? Oh, they don't want us to teach about racism. They want us to censor any book that even mentions it. So these are the books that end up getting taken off the shelves.
And they're looking through 1.6 million books. So they're like, well, we can't put any of them out there until we know we're not gonna get sued for them. This is the law that the Republicans passed. And then when they're caught on it, they say, oh, golly gee, we would never. We didn't mean that book. We meant all the other books talking about racism, but that one's about a baseball player, so let that one go. Jesus Christ.
All right, well, let's move on and have a little fun, shall we? Kayleigh McEnany, maybe a little braver than I thought. Let's watch.
When you look at Nikki Haley's polling, she was at about 1%, now she's at 3%. She was the hottest name in Republican politics in 2011 to like 2015, I would say. This is the case, what you're watching right now, polling at 3% for Governor Ron DeSantis to get in now. People say, will he get in? Will he wait? How can you wait when you are currently the hottest governor in Republican politics, seeing how hard it is to regenerate that attention almost a decade later?
Oof, that was Kayleigh McEnany, who was the press secretary for Donald Trump in the tail end of his term, of course, essentially calling for Ron DeSantis to enter the Republican primaries for 2024. Oh, and then by the way, Nikki Haley. Was Nikki Haley ever a superstar?
Well, in Republican circles, she kind of was. I'll get into that in a second. But yeah, Trump's not gonna like that. He don't like that. Nope. Okay, so incoming attack against Kayleigh McEnany in 3, 2, 1.
Can't wait.
Okay, so I wonder what nickname he's gonna give her. But this one really is an et tu Kayleigh. Okay, I mean, she was the biggest Trump fan, and the way she got to be press secretary, she went on TV, debated people like me and Anna, and was like, Trump's the best, he's the greatest of all time. The liberals are so unfair to him, he's a genius of geniuses. Now she's got a nice, comfy job at Fox News, and Rupert Murdoch favors DeSantis over Trump. And all of a sudden, Kayleigh McEnany's like, DeSantis has got to get in against Trump. He's got to get in. He's got to get in right now.
Yep, so good.
You know why? Because none of the right-wing leaders have any morals. So there's no honor among thieves. So she's like, you were buttering my bread before, so I lied on your behalf. Now this guy's buttering my bread, so
is he though?
I lie on his behalf. Not DeSantis, Murdoch.
Oh yes, right? yes. So that was on Fox News, of course. She's now, I don't know, contributor on Fox News.
Of course, she's getting tons of money.
And look, you can see it if you just pay a little bit of attention. There seems to be a concerted effort by both the Republican establishment and also right-wing media to bolster certainly Ron DeSantis, but now that Nikki Haley has announced that she intends to run in 2024, you're seeing a little bit of that for Nikki Haley as well. And remember, Donald Trump did not have nice things to say about Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley entering the race. In fact, here's a little reminder of that.
Ron would have not been governor if it wasn't for me. Well, then when I hear he might run, I consider that very disloyal. Talked to her for a little while, but I said, look, go by your heart if you want to run. She's publicly stated I would never run against my president. He was a great president.
So he's really, look, I think it's hilarious that he even bothers saying bitter things about Nikki Haley. I don't think that she's got a shot, and I'll explain why later on the show. But I do also want to mention, just to bolster my point about the concerted effort to prop up people like Ron DeSantis, here's an example of it.
My theory is, wouldn't it be great if DeSantis run with Trump as VP?
DeSantis and Trump are on the ballot. Ben, you first. You only know what you know about them right now.
Who would I vote for in the primary?
Yeah.
I'd vote for DeSantis in the primary.
I'd vote for DeSantis, yeah.
Yeah, I would take DeSantis, yeah.
I am supporting DeSantis. DeSantis is just gone from being awesome to being unbelievably good.
And everywhere you go, you see crazy support for him. And I think he's sort of what the future of the Republican Party is. But in some ways, he's already acting as the president because we have a president who is obviously not doing particularly well.
Now, others have made a different calculation. And I think the calculation to continue backing Trump because they think their daddy is still gonna do well in the Republican primary in 2024. I think they have the right idea. Honestly, from what I've seen in terms of responding to attacks from Trump, neither Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis know what to do. It's kind of hilarious.
No, for sure, Nikki Haley's a mess. She has no chance. But I'm gonna come back to why Kayleigh McEnany is actually kind of right in a second. But first, I want to read you Trump's statement about Nikki Haley because I think it's hilarious. So he said, the greatest thing Nikki Haley did for our country and the great state of South Carolina was accepting the position of United Nations ambassador so that the incredible then Lieutenant Governor, Henry McMaster, could be the governor of South Carolina, where he's done an absolutely fantastic job. That was a big reason why I appointed Nikki to the position. It was a favor to the people I love in South Carolina.
Look, let's just pause for a second.
Yeah.
No, that was masterful though.
I know, but it's also hilarious.
It's hilarious, but it's an effective dig, right? I think it's effective. I don't know. I could be wrong.
But no, it's of course it's going to work. Every dig's going to work. The Republicans love anyone who punches people in the face, right?
I kind of do too.
Yeah, I hear you on that. But but what's hilarious about that dig is like, I knew she was such a crappy governor in South Carolina that in order to do the good folks in South Carolina a favor, I promoted her to United Nations ambassador for the United States of America. That is not a winning argument for your management style.
America first.
Okay, who's going to represent us globally? The woman doing a crappy job in South Carolina. Okay, man. And remember how he's like, I'm the best manager. I will manage everything perfectly. And then, like 80% of the people that work with him, they're terrible. Should have never hired them. They're the worst. Okay. Well, then I guess you're the world's worst manager, which is of course true. But why is Kayleigh McEnany right? Well, look, for a little while, Nikki Haley was hot among Republican circles, and why? Because Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't wrong. She's Bush in heels, right? She's classic establishment Republican, and she's a giant warmonger, loves corporate power, all those things. So of course the Republican establishment loves her, right? And if she had gotten into an earlier presidential race, maybe she'd had a shot while she was hot back then, right? Now Ron DeSantis is super hot. Why? Because Murdoch and a couple other right-wing media executives have decided they prefer him to Trump, and that tape we showed you, that was devastating. All the right wingers, oh yeah, DeSantis. Because they know where their bread is buttered, okay? And so
also, but let me also just note, there are plenty of right-wing media figures and also corporate executives and all that who actually despise Trump, but felt like they had to support him anyway, right? Now that there might be another option, it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to prop up the other option because 100%. They don't actually like Trump. It's really important to understand that.
Well, DeSantis is going to give them everything they want, minus the instability of the madman that's Donald Trump.
Right, exactly, that's right, yeah.
And when Trump tried to end democracy, those oligarchs thought, no, wait, we already have this government on lockdown. If he's solely in charge and he's the dictator, well, that reduces our power. We don't want that. It's not like they're trying to protect the American people. They're just trying to protect themselves.
Exactly.
But so there's a battle between like, just like two giant evil forces, which are both horrible. But back to the political strategy point that McEnany is making, if DeSantis waits till 2028 because he's scared of Donald Trump, all of his momentum might be gone. He might be an afterthought, just like Nikki Haley is today, polling at 3%. Oh, remember that DeSantis guy?
Yeah,
right?
She is right about that.
Yeah, so if DeSantis has any courage at all, and he's actually gonna make a run for it, he should go now, and he should go in as soon as possible to get more media attention. But I mean, I think DeSantis is a coward, and I'd be a little surprised if he went in. I think he's probably wetting himself thinking about it right now, like, because as he sees Trump crush everything in his path, I guarantee you he's ordering Depends as we speak.
Oof. All right. Well, we got to take a break. Try to get that image out of your mind. And when we come back, Nikki Haley, I don't know if she's in a competition for who's more cowardly, but you're about to see how she performs when she's asked about Trump on Fox News. That and more coming up. Don't miss it.
This man had evil veins.
Can't let that happen.
Back on TYT. First of all, don't forget that Watchlist has a new time now. It's right before the Young Turks. That's 5 o'clock Eastern. That's JR's show. Make sure you're checking it out, both live and go to youtube.com/watchlistTYT to subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. And don't forget the progress report. That's Jonathan Larson's great newsletter. Everybody's raving about it. So that way you get the unbiased news, real reporting, real journalism. And it's not just our journalism. We bring in other journalists like The Intercept, The Lever, et cetera. So perfect place to get your information in the morning. You could obviously use the QR code there or go to tyt.com/newsletter. We try to make our URLs logical. All right, let's go to members. Robin Hudspeth writes in, yeah, that's exactly happening to my 86-year-old mom and I. We're both on Social Security and the rental we live here in South Florida where we've been living for the last 20 years. Now we pay $1,400 a month. We both make the same amount as the rent. We church for food and we can't afford our medicine and we have to move. Now we have nowhere to go. We have no affordable rent anywhere in the country we live in the county that we live in, alone, let alone our state. And we don't know what we're gonna do. There's no hope. So that is life under corporate rule. That's happening to all of us. So they have to spend all the money on rent and then they increase the rent. And they have to go and go get food from churches and other places. It's a story we're probably not gonna get to today. They're now cutting food stamps again. Just to crush you a little bit more. The trash compactor gets a little closer to us every year. All right, Rebel Dragon writes, good afternoon, TYT family. Today's my 5-year activist member anniversary. Best decision I've made in a very long time. Thank you for all you do, TYT. Thank you. Without you guys, we got nothing. Lou B says, Cenk, please clip this so I can send it to every so-called progressive in DC. Where the F are they? But brother, I got, Lou, I hate to tell you this, but people have sent them plenty of our clips, okay? And they don't want to hear it. They take great offense at it. Like, are you saying we're not doing enough? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How dare you? Why? Who are you? Are you elitist now? Anyway, so, all right, let's go to Twitch. Eat with Max, oh no, sorry, I read that one. Altruism is imaginary says, I was the human resources lady for a giant corporation for 10 years. The situation became untenable as the performance metrics became increasingly dehumanizing. I finally left. That is that is a perfect description of corporate rule in America. Increasingly dehumanizing. So thank you for sharing these stories so that people know they're not alone. And Sugarcane Game says, I'm bright blue spot in a red state. My mother actually watched the police beating video and finally said, I think you might be right about the police. The barrel of apples might be rotten, not just a few. See, we're getting through to people. Keep spreading the word, spreading the videos, you're awesome.
This man had evil veins.
Can't let that happen.
All right, back on TYT Cenk and Anna with you guys. Gary Cooper, a member on YouTube, said, when I left my last job, I got a lead parachute. That's what most of us get, brother. Yep. All right, Casper.
Well, we've got an embarrassing moment, in my opinion, for Nikki Haley.
If you had to delineate where, say, you and President Trump differ on issues, where would you start?
Well, first, let's say in reference to Whoopi, the thought of me getting into the race makes the liberals' heads explode.
No, it doesn't. Yeah, you don't stand a chance. I don't know. I mean, I haven't really seen any liberal heads exploding, but for some reason, Republicans like to brand themselves as super controversial for the libs because Republican voters like to own the libs. But for the Republican voters who think that we're shaking in our boots over Nikki Haley, no. Yeah, not even a little bit.
She's a standard corporate robot. Yeah. The only good news is she has a 0% chance of making it out of the Republican primary. But I mean, that's good news for the Republicans because that's exactly the kind of corporate robot that would lose to a corporate robot on our side.
Yep, no, that's exactly right. Now, with that said, Sean Hannity asked the question again. As you can tell, Nikki Haley avoided it because she doesn't want to differentiate herself from Donald Trump or say anything that might insult Donald Trump. So he tries again. Let's see how it plays out.
First of all, we've got too many politicians in D.C. that are past their prime. We have to have term limits in Congress. We need to see competency tests for any elected official over the age of 75. We've got to stop the spending addiction that is happening, that is causing inflation to go up. And we need to start realizing that we don't need our politicians getting on TV and talking. We need the people in D.C. doing, and we need to spark a fire up under them. And that's what I'm willing to do.
So that actually wasn't after Hannity asked her the same question for a second time. She just felt the need to express what her policy proposals are, what she stands for. Do you want to comment on that before we go?
Yeah, real quick. That question that Hannity asked that we showed you, what's the difference between you and Trump? She had a 2-minute filibuster response.
Yep.
All of her talking points, but nothing about Trump except that dig you saw. Oh, the politicians are too old. We need to have term limits. And she's pushing that competency exam for above 75-year-olds.
Yep.
Okay. And so the constant dig at Trump's age and mental competence. But yeah, but what's your policy difference? And Hannity asked again.
No, but also, if you're gonna insult Trump, like if that's your line to insult Trump, then why don't you name him? Right? She's doing this little game where she's like, yeah, competency test for politicians 75 and older, right? Okay, who are you referring to? So if Republican voters get salty with her for saying that because they think she's talking about Trump, which by the way, I think she is.
She definitely is.
Yeah, she definitely is. She'll be like, no, maybe I'm talking about Biden.
Oh, that sounds so courageous.
What a
You're never gonna win a Republican primary softballing like that. Either hit him or get out of the race.
100%. Now Hannity tries asking her the question again, what makes your policies different from Trump's? Let's watch.
Let me go back to my original question, though, because anybody that is looking or seeking a nomination, you're going to be comparing and contrasting your policy positions, your views, what direction you want to take the country with your competitors. Right now, there's former President Trump is the only other candidate for the nomination. We expect many others, maybe even Mike Pompeo, who was on earlier in the program today. Where do you see, if you see, policy differences beyond what you mentioned, which are generational differences? What specific policy areas would you say part with Donald Trump?
What I am saying is I don't kick sideways. I'm kicking forward. Joe Biden is the president. He's the one I'm running against. And what I'm saying is you don't have to be 80 years old to be president.
No, you don't get it. You have to run against Republicans in what's called the Republican primary. She knows this before you're running against Joe Biden, right? I don't kick sideways, I kick forward. It's not gonna work. I'm just saying, it's not gonna work. Come on.
Okay, so let's break it down. So number one, that was a hilarious evasion. He asked twice and she would not say it. I'm gonna come back to that because, wait, what are their policy differences? I have the answer. But my favorite is Anna put it, is I don't kick sideways. What is the weakest sauce I've ever seen?
Totally.
You're gonna win like a vicious, like.
It's gonna be the most vicious Republican primary.
Just the people are bringing chainsaws to the Republican primary and you're like, I don't kick sideways. Nobody even knows what that means. Okay, so this weak sauce is hilarious.
Yep.
Now, meanwhile, Ann Coulter doesn't like her. You know what she said about Nikki Haley today? She should go back to her own country where they worship rats.
She's disgusting, by the way. Nikki Haley was born in the United States. She is of Indian heritage. So that's what Ann Coulter was referring to.
Yeah, but that's the Republican primary where they say go back to your own country when your country's America. Okay, and they say that Indians worship rats. Okay, so I mean, this is the vicious arena octagon that you have entered. I don't kick sideways, but look, I gotta tell you, you gotta kick in every direction if you wanna have a prayer. So this is not gonna work. Now the policy differences, there's basically two policy differences between Haley and Trump. Nikki Haley is a neoconservative. She wants to start more wars, okay? And so in that way, she's worse than Trump, okay? But the other policy difference is Trump thinks democracy, who needs it? I'd like to stay here forever whether I win the elections or not. And so he's anti-democracy, pro-fascist. And Nikki Haley's a standard corporate robot, so she wouldn't try to topple democracy. And so she wins on that count. But by the way, other than that, they agree on everything.
That's right. That's right.
Overall, the whole thing's a mirage. Almost all the Republican candidates agree with each other. Tax cuts for the rich, deregulate all the corporations. Corporate power is awesome. The voters suck. Let's never do anything for them.
Now, we got to show you one more video because after that, Nikki Haley went on Fox and Friends, same network, different show. And then we're gonna maybe question whether her soft treatment of Trump worked. Did Trump avoid attacking her? You gotta wait to find out, but first, this video.
I know you were on last night with Sean and he was asking you how you differentiate yourself from Donald Trump. And you said originally that you had called him to ask his, not permission, but just to tell him you're gonna run. And he did give you his blessing. I know he's your friend. He appointed you to UN ambassador.
First of all, President Trump is my friend. I was honored to work with him in the administration. I thought he was the right president at the right time. I don't have to be 100% Trump or 100% anti-Trump. That's not how I am. President Trump will tell you, I say what I think. When you're doing something right, I support you. When you're doing something wrong, I'm gonna call you out for it. But at the end of the day, that's how I square it. But I'm not kicking sideways in this race. I'm kicking forward. It is Joe Biden who's the president.
How would Donald Trump do on the competency test if at 76 years old?
You know, I think he did great the last time he did it. I have no reason to think he wouldn't do well this time.
Let's see what your friend Donald Trump has to say about you after you ran away from any opportunity to be critical of him. On Truth Social, he posted this. Nikki Haley had a hard time making the decision to run for president because she very publicly stated that she would never run against the president. He did a great job and was the best president in my lifetime. I told Nikki to follow her heart, not her ambition or belief. Who knows, stranger things have happened. She's polling at 1%, not a bad start. Come on, come on. God, he's too good at this.
Okay, I believe that's called kicking sideways.
Ooh, he has no problem kicking sideways. He kicks all over the place, right? Another one. The greatest thing Nikki Haley did for our country and the great state of South Carolina was accepting the position of United Nations ambassador so that the incredible then Lieutenant Governor Henry McMaster could be governor of South Carolina, where he has done an absolutely fantastic job. That was a big reason why I appointed Nikki to the position. It was a favor to the people I love in South Carolina.
President Trump and I are friends. Are you friends? Is that what friends do to each other? Man. No, he's gonna break you, and it's so obvious. Please leave the race. But my favorite part of the whole story is her scared eyes whenever she's asked about Trump in both clips. And she's like this, like, hello, I'm a corporate robot politician. Tax cuts for the rich are great, aren't they? Right? And they're like, and we'd like to ask you about Trump. And she's like,
look at her face, look at her face.
It's right there, the sad eyes. Sad eyes, Nikki Haley. Here, Trump, that was on me. Okay. No, I'll tell you, I mean, we are just great friends. Please don't go on Truth Social and listen to what he says about me.
He's gonna attack you. How, you know, we often say this, but we're reminded of it over and over again. Man, politicians are not smart. They're just not, like, how did you not see this coming, Nikki? How did you not see this coming?
And you gotta make a decision. By the way, can you guys roll the first Hannity thing too? Because I wanna see the sad eyes on that one. Yeah. But that's the thing with politicians. Hey, Nikki, you know, when you run, they're gonna ask you about Trump because Trump's in the race. And so you have to have something prepared, and trying to avoid it is not going to work. So you have to, and there's sad eyes, sad eyes. Okay, so when you go in, you have to think to yourself, either I'm gonna try to break him because he's certainly gonna try to break me, or I'm not getting in the race. You can't go in there and go, I have a talking point my consultant came up with. How did it do, guys?
Yep.
Yeah, it got your ass kicked. That's how it did.
1000%. You can't be mealy-mouthed when it comes to taking Trump to task. If you're gonna run against him in the primaries, you're not running against Biden. You gotta get through the primaries first. You gotta beat Trump, beat DeSantis. But she's so terrified of him. I don't even know why she did this. Bad idea.
Love it. All right, bonus episode we have, penis size.
Big penises.
Is it bigger or smaller? A shocking study. TYT.com/join. See you there.
This man had evil veins.
Hey everyone, Matteo Scarapore here, author of Black Buck, which is Shop TYT's first fiction book ever. I'm honored. So, Black Buck is about a young man named Darren who's living in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. He lives with his mom, he has his girlfriend, he has his best friend, he has his neighborhood, and his neighborhood